Welcome back to the Inside the Industry Podcast, Season 4, Episode 4, your ultimate guide to the inner workings of the pharmaceutical industry. Get ready for exclusive interviews, insider tips, and expert analyses from the leading minds shaping the industry. We're here to answer any of your questions, so stay tuned as we're about to unveil our new consulting business. Get ready to dive into the fascinating world of the pharmaceuticals, so let's begin with this episode. Thanks, guys. Welcome back to the Insight to Industry. My name is Ravi. I'm a second-year pharmacy student at the UNC Eshelman School of Pharmacy. Today I'm joined by Dr. Taylor Weis, who is a Medical Science Liaison at Blueprint Medicines. She recently graduated from UNC Eshelman School of Pharmacy in 2017, where she directly entered a clinical residency at the University of Michigan, where she focused on hematology and oncology. And then after finishing her PGY2 residency, she worked directly in the Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, before then transitioning to industry. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess just to get things started, this is just to get the ball rolling. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your journey into through pharmacy school and kind of where you're at now, just very briefly.
Yeah, so I actually was raised in North Carolina outside of Charlotte, and I knew I wanted to enter the medical field and pharmacy. Somehow I stumbled upon pharmacy and found it interesting. So I was at undergrad at UNC Chapel Hill, and quickly kind of got involved actually in pharmacy organizations from my first year on the campus. So I joined actually the Kappa Psi Pharmacy fraternity when actually they took members that were undergraduates. So I was, quickly in kind of a cohort of people that were in pharmacy school or applying to pharmacy school, which definitely kind of makes an interesting environment to, really guide your path towards applying for a pharmacy school. And then I also joined the pre-pharmacy club as well, and was really focused on that path. And so I did 2 years of undergrad, applied to pharmacy school, and then started at UNC Eshelman School of Pharmacy in August of 2013. So in pharmacy school, I really was mainly focused on clinical pharmacy. That's, a lot of our pharmacotherapy lectures were focused on clinical. A lot of our rotations were focused on clinical pharmacy. And that was really my passion at the time. And it wasn't until residency that I learned that I really had a strong interest in hematology oncology.
Yeah, definitely. And would you say when you're in pharmacy school, did you ever consider a career in industry, or was it very kind of oriented everything you were focused on to clinical or even community?
I was interested in it. I had several classmates that were very interested in it, which, it's kind of the fear of missing out. Like, what are they so excited about this industry path? But to me, it just seemed so foreign, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of exposure to what a pharmaceutical industry company entails, what those roles are, where to me, it was very clear, okay, this is a clinical pharmacist. I think this is really cool. I can, help patients, work with the multidisciplinary team. And that was just more of a clear path for me, I would say. But I certainly always had curiosity about industry, but didn't quite fully understand what it meant, what the roles are, and how you actually contribute to patient care through those roles as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then while you're a pharmacy student, what activities did you like? I know obviously they catered more towards a clinical role, but what activities did you kind of invest your time into? And how did that help you even today, in industry? Because a lot of things translate, whether it's work ethic and things like that.
I was kind of throwing darts at everything and just seeing what stuck. I had an open mind. I was willing to try almost anything in pharmacy school just to see what my interests were. I was very involved in student organizations like Student Senate, and I also was very involved in my pharmacy fraternity, and also involved in some other organizations as well, like pre-pharmacy clubs. So really getting exposure to, a lot of different pharmacy students that have different interests helps, because the more people you meet, the more ideas that you can bounce more ideas off of others. The other thing I really enjoyed as well was getting different exposures to different pharmacy practices. So I actually was an intern at Rite Aid as a pharmacy intern, all 4 years of pharmacy school, which it did make me realize that wasn't, where I wanted to be long term,
Right.
but some of those valuable skills I learned were very important when I was a hospital clinical pharmacist as well. So I'm glad I had that experience. And it's actually, some of those skills have really been helpful for me to understand on the industry side,
Right.
reimbursement, what's actually happening at the pharmacy.
Yeah.
And then as well, I got really involved in the SHAC clinic. I don't know if it's still called that
Yep.
now. Oh yeah, the Student Health Action Coalition, I believe is the name of it.
Yep.
But I really enjoyed my time volunteering there because it was, pretty clinical focused. The disease states that we were treating were pretty narrow in terms of, hypertension,
Right.
hyperlipidemia. It wasn't super complex at the time, but you really learned how to think critically, think about patients a little bit differently than you might have otherwise. And all those skills really helped me throughout both, in my clinical career and now in industry as well.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I've noticed a lot of upperclassmen that I look up to at ESOP, a lot of them, spent their whole time investing into clinical pharmacy, and now they've realized in their fourth year rotations, oh, this is not for me. And I think a big thing is burnout, a lot of hours. It's hard in the hospital. And what advice would you give them, if they've now come to that realization, oh, I want to go into industry, but I don't know where to start? What's the first thing you would, say to them?
I'd say it's never too late. You can transition and explore different pathways at any point in your career. And I've learned that very recently when we can kind of get more into kind of my path industry. But
Yeah,
um, I've had, colleagues that went straight into the fellowship program with minimal industry experience. I also had colleagues that went into clinical pharmacy, like myself first for a few years and got, kind of that really valuable clinical experience and then tried to break into industry. I've also had colleagues that maybe were in more non-traditional consulting roles that they, got right outside of pharmacy school and then
right,
transitioned to different industry roles. So there's no one clear path. I would say the important things is to honestly, the diversity of your experience is really important, and you don't really want the same exact experience as everyone else that's
right.
applying. So I know there's a lot of pressure, and I remember, all the discussions when we were selecting our rotations where people would get very stressed out about, oh, I need this specific rotation, or else I'm not going to get this specific internship. But really, your path and what you bring to your team in industry is what's really valuable. My MSL team that I'm currently on has people from PhD backgrounds, rare disease backgrounds, clinical backgrounds, and all of us together are what make a really powerful team. So
Right.
keep an open mind and don't say no to these opportunities that might come up if they're of interest to you.
No, definitely. So like, yeah, let's kind of dive into your kind of story. And you finish your fourth year and then you go straight into residency. So what was that thought process and where were you at that point in time?
Yeah, so my focus was, I really loved UNC as, not only a pharmacy school program, but their residency program was always really impressive to me. I did all of my P4 rotations at UNC, so I got to, see how a really strong, powerful pharmacy run hospital works. And that's honestly, it's a luxury that, we had being trained at ESOP. They're very, it's not as common as you think when you go out to branch out to these other institutions. And so I really wanted to mimic kind of that environment when I was looking at residencies. And fortunately, I was able to match at University of Michigan, which has a very similar, very strong pharmacy program. And really, the clinical pharmacist and administrative pharmacist have a very important role at that hospital in managing formulary, making clinical decisions. And so I got to learn from, some of the most amazing pharmacists you could imagine. And I thought this is exactly, what I wanted to do. And I found some great mentors in hematology and oncology. And I thought this was, all very interesting to me. And it still very much is.
Right.
And so when I was looking at roles after residency, I really wanted something where I could be very clinical, very involved in clinical decision making with the physicians and the advanced practice providers, the nurses. Like I really wanted to be integrated into that team. And my role as a leukemia pharmacist at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center really provided that. And it was an amazing learning experience. I'm learning with some of the top leukemia physicians in the world. We see the most rarest of the rare in terms of leukemia diagnoses or related diagnoses. And so it was just a really, big learn. It was honestly kind of like an extended residency in
Yeah.
terms of that. Of course, in clinical pharmacy, it does get a bad rap in terms of the hours, but honestly, I think it's oftentimes self-inflicted
Right.
as pharmacists. If it's our type A, we want to go above and beyond all the time. And I was that way when I first came out of residency. I was like, I'm going to be there until the work is done. I'm going to, answer these pages at 8 p.m. because, that's what I want to do.
Right.
But I quickly learned that that's not going to be sustainable long term.
Yeah.
for my personal lifestyle. So I had to kind of try to set boundaries, and it's much harder to pull back boundaries once that expectation is set.
Right.
But I really enjoyed it. However, what got me thinking in towards of, different roles is, I'm currently in New York City, where Memorial Sloan Kettering is. I don't know if I want to live in New York City for the rest of my career.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, the hospitals that really provide that opportunity to have really true clinical focus, it's harder. You're going to be more restricted in terms of where you live, or you need to be more flexible in the type of clinical role that you're taking. So I wanted a little bit more flexibility in, where I lived eventually. I also, wanted some opportunities for a little bit more in career advancement.
Right.
I realized I didn't want to do the same role as a clinical pharmacist my entire career. I was kind of getting a little bit fatigued with the role.
Yeah.
And I thought it was time for something new.
Did you feel like there was not too much upward trajectory with like a clinical pharmacist, like you'd reached that peak and that you were going to work those hours, you were going to keep, going above and beyond, and not kind of seeing that gratification about, I guess, everyone has their career goals to go
Yeah.
higher and higher. And did you not see that long term?
I think if it was really what I wanted to do long term, and that was really where I belonged, a lot of pharmacists have amazing careers as a clinical pharmacist. Some of my mentors have been pharmacists for 15, 20 years, and are well published. They're
Right.
speaking all across the world. There's different ways that you can find career advancement in clinical pharmacy,
Right.
but that comes with a cost, right? So the more time you're spending on these other activities that you find value in, that may take away from your patient care responsibilities. And not every pharmacy role or pharmacy manager is going to understand that, hey, I'm taking on these more things. I'm becoming, more of an expert in this area as a
Yeah.
clinical pharmacist. I want to take on these extra projects. They may not necessarily take away kind of the clinical responsibilities. And as we know, with staffing shortages and
Right.
a lot of this kind of flight out into industry roles, that it becomes harder and harder to fit time for those things that you really enjoy doing. And I really enjoyed research and publishing and precepting
Yeah.
residents, but that all comes at an increased time on top of my workload. And, there to do all that stuff, I realized that I was going to, have to work on weekends or work
Right.
longer hours. And not every institution is going to be that way. I will say, it really kind of depends on, your specific service that you're covering, your manager, your hospital, and some pharmacists are able to find that happy medium that they're really happy with long term. But that just kind of wasn't necessarily my experience, and so that's why I was looking for something different.
No, definitely. So at that point in time, how did you even, process, oh, now I'm more interested on the industry side? How did you begin that search for like a position in the industry?
It was a little overwhelming. I had some friends in industry, and I kind of tried to pick their brains about, what kind of roles are there for someone who has been an oncology pharmacist for a few
Right.
years. But what I really started doing when I became interested is just reaching out to my network. And if I knew someone in an industry role that I was maybe interested in, I'd ask them if they would, have a call, kind of like what we're doing right now, just pick
Yeah.
their brain about their position, how they got there, what was the application process like, what are some tips that they learned along the way. I probably had, I don't know, anywhere from 5 to 10 different phone conversations with people from all types of industry roles, medical science liaison roles,
Yeah.
like principal clinical scientist roles, all of those that I was interested in. I just wanted to get more knowledge about, what skill sets they're looking for. So how can I prepare to apply for those?
Right. And then for our viewers and even myself, people who are, recently interested into industry, do you mind explaining like what your day-to-day is as a medical science liaison and what that kind of entails?
Yeah, you'll hear this from everyone who's a medical science liaison, but there is no like typical day. Um, and it depends on the disease state you're in, the company that you're in. So I'll just preface that. My role is very unique because I actually help. I have a program that's focused on rare disease. So rare disease is going to be a different ball game than something that's more common like diabetes.
Right.
In terms of getting physicians in front of you and finding experts in this rare disease, it's going to be a little bit more challenging. But I would say my territory is pretty large. It crosses 4 states, so um, I'm maybe about once every other week or every week, I'm flying somewhere for an overnight or two to try
Wow.
to, for some meetings. So that's something that to consider. There could be some travel involved.
Right.
However, I have a colleague that has a smaller territory because she covers just New York City, and so
Yeah.
she doesn't have to travel as much. So that's something to keep in mind, is kind of the territory that may change kind of how much you're traveling. And then, with the pandemic, there's been a shift to a lot of virtual healthcare provider calls. So I'm meeting with a lot of physicians to discuss, our research programs, the data that we have. A lot of times, especially for rare disease, I'm doing a lot of disease state education. So some of the
Right.
providers I know may not even actually know a lot about the disease, and they may just kind of want to learn more information. And then a lot of that, as a medical science liaison, you're kind of that liaison between even our clinical development team for clinical trials, or if
Right.
one of your providers in your territory has a research idea with your product, you're kind of helping facilitate that process as well. So a lot of research can be involved in the MSL role. And a lot of that too is conferences. So conferences are a big part of my time, preparing for conferences, being at conferences. And probably the biggest difference I noticed transitioning from clinical to MSL role at a conference is I'm so much more busy as an MSL at a conference. I feel like as a clinical pharmacist, I was usually presenting and I had this presentation, and then I could kind of
Right.
relax, go to sessions, catch up with friends. On the industry side, your goal there is you have these physicians in person, and this is your time to get that face-to-face interaction with them, try to learn more about these institutions, who you should talk to,
Yeah.
make those connections. And so you really want to use on all of these opportunities, whether that be poster sessions. If you see one of your providers in your territory presenting, you probably want to go up and, say hi to them afterwards. So you're on a lot more, and you're also, scheduling meetings with these providers during the conference. So you can be very busy in that sense, and conferences and planning for conferences can be a part of the job as well.
Definitely. That sounds awesome. But just a preference, when you first started the position and even in residency, what challenges like first arose when you started? And like, do you believe that UNC ESOP prepared you for both residency and industry in their own unique ways?
Yeah, I think ESOP definitely prepared me. I will say, coming from ESOP and they see that on your resume, that's already, a really big asset to you, because a lot of these employers know, it's a top pharmacy school. They know the rigor of the program, the rigor of the rotations that you're going through. And I would say, my fourth year rotations, I felt like I was more than prepared to even go into residency and then afterwards. For the MSL role, I mean, you're taking a lot of skills from all these different areas of your training and kind of putting them together. I don't think there's really a great one, I don't think there's necessarily an MSL fellowship that you would have to do in order
Right.
to be prepared. I think you could really, the big things is you have to have great interpersonal skills or soft skills, because you're
Right.
communicating with providers and you want to be able to express that information effectively, efficiently, and also, develop a rapport with these physicians as well. You also have to have deep clinical knowledge. So you're learning that through your training as a pharmacy student. If you have any other clinical experiences, you're going to really get that hands-on experience and understand kind of really the patient perspective, as well as you get those patient care interactions under your belt in your rotations. So all of that, and really the critical thinking, I think, comes into play a lot, because we're basically taking all the information that we're learning from the field and our interactions, and we're kind of really giving this information back to our company so that they know, okay, these are the things that are missing in our strategy. These are things that we need to change.
Right.
This is something that we need to do. So there's a lot of strategy and critical thinking involved as well. And so I think any of these experiences that you have along the way are going to help you in a unique way.
No, definitely. So I guess my kind of last overarching question, for our, PY1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, or even pharmacists outside, they've graduated. What advice would you give them, for all of them that are, now considering industry as a career? What's like a generalized, little tidbit that, you wish you had known that when you're in pharmacy school?
I would say I just realize it's not that intimidating of a prospect as you think. Really, in these industry roles, I would say don't feel like you have to know exactly what role in industry you want to do. I, started an MSL role. It felt like a good, transition to me from clinical to MSL. Do I think I'll be an MSL for the rest of my career? Most likely not. I'm very interested in other aspects of industry, like clinical development, like a medical director role. There's a lot of different things that you can go in from there. So really kind of learn about these roles, certainly like I did, know what they entail and kind of go with what you think is best, but know that there's always that flexibility there. And finding mentors in these areas too, to help you kind of gain your knowledge and understanding, I think will get you on a right path to kind of finding the career path that's right for you, which may be different at different times. Like, for example, an MSL role where I'm traveling a lot may not be ideal if
Right.
I'm having kids and wanting a family. I may want something that's a little bit more at home. However, on the other side, you could say that the MSL role is pretty flexible because I work from home and I can kind of make my schedule. So it really depends on what works for you, and that may change at different parts of your life.
No, definitely. Well, thank you so much for your advice, your time. I'm sure our viewers will appreciate your perspective on things. I surely do. So
Yeah,
thank you again.
of course. It was very nice meeting you.
Thank you. Yeah, you too as well.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and be sure to check out our vibrant Instagram page. Join our community and help us grow by sharing our content with others who would find it valuable. Let's build this community of industry enthusiasts together. Also, stay tuned for our new consulting service that will be released soon to all y'all, especially for those interested in the industry. This will be very crucial for your internships and fellowships. It'll be hosted by none other than our co-founders. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the support.